Tyler. 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 Shut the doors. There we go. And the doors are shut. We're in. And we'll see if anybody shows up and tells us everything's working. Supposedly the camera's working. Supposedly the audio's working. We've been having technical difficulties. Hey, Robert. Tell me if everything's working. Guys, hey, Wayne. Hey, Wayne. Hey, Glenn. Hey, Frog. Tell me if you can see me and you can hear me, because we've been having all kinds of problems. So, just got home from work. Okay. Am I moving my mouth? Can you understand me? Looking good, sounds good. Okay, so we got everything working. All right. Yeah, we had nothing but problems. The audio was not working, but the video worked. Then the video went off, and the audio was working. And me and Tyler and Trevor were constantly working and messing with it. It was kind of stressful. At 3:59, we accidentally figured it out, is what I'm thinking. With the cameras completely adjusted off, too. We're way off to the side, aren't we? So let me see if I can move this. Get us back to more of a normal. Is that more normal? That's a little better. Anyways, so there we are. Looking fine. And then, of course, we didn't kick on the light back in the back, so then it's going to get dark in here. But I guess we'll live with it today. So there we go. So we did get it up and running. It is Friday. Oh, and of course, I don't know what's going on here. The mic might be popping big. I'm going to have to move the mic back because it's like going way over the top. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to test run this weekend and see what happens. What happens is they decided to use this computer as a slave to do DVDs, which normally this computer is just for the podcast live stuff and my audio stuff, and I don't do anything else with it. I don't Google, I don't do anything else. It's just purely for you've got some sun. Yeah, but the problem is the sun is going and the blinds are turned wrong. It's a little odd. I get that weird shadow right now. And but anyways, they used it to make DVDs, and as they were using this computer to make DVDs, I come sit down, I start to think everything's fine, I look and make sure all the cables are hooked up, and I sit down and then nothing's working, and I think it's always because there's all kinds of activity going on here. I did fix the cord thing. I eliminated a bunch of stuff, recabled stuff, tied stuff back, so my feet won't be kicking stuff off no more. So I did fix some things, but, it's problematic. I'm not here when they're working on the other projects. And, of course, they left all their stuff here. That's always annoying, because it's usually the workstation here is very clean, and I had to keep my drink on the right side, which is annoying, because I'm left-handed and I like my drink on my left side, so I had to fix that too. Anyhow, okay, so we're back and we're kind of here. So there we go. And it's a warm one today. I think it's about 99. I'm guessing it's 99. Let's see what it is right now. It's 98 degrees. So, and sunny surprise. So it's sunny. It is a bit warm. There's a very light breeze, but it is hot. And it's getting there. But it doesn't look like we're going to be jumping into the hundreds this week. So it's kind of nice. I bought the book Ripples of Lost Echoes. Any good? Your thoughts? I really like the book. It's a weird book. It's not like what I would say if you were starting out on The Dutchman, a book to read, because it's kind of a weird all over the place book. Good evening, monkey. And we're already starting to see smoke on the horizon. But it's an odd book, because now Bob wrote another book, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, and it's a little different. It's not quite as all over there. This book Bob wrote just before he died. He wrote it, and he was still he was putting it out there for sale just before he died. The other one, he wrote two more. I think one was under Val Paris, which he did all his newspaper articles, and then there's another one. He wrote all kinds of stuff, so I don't know what he planned on publishing. This was the one he did finally publish and put out in public. That had the map, and it used to have the little map that was within the book and all that. And I don't have one handy nearby here, but yeah, he put those books out, had printed. I have 2 boxes of them, so I have about 100 of them sitting in the garage. So if you ever make it to the Rendezvous, we usually, between myself and Sal, you can always get a free copy because we just give them away. Phantom of the Superstitions is one of them. That one, yeah, the Phantom of the Superstitions is, I think that might be the Val Paris one, right? But anyways, he wrote several. They're different. I still think Ripples is kind of a cool book because I think he put it together because he knew things were coming to an end, and then he got someone behind him, and it's just pretty neat book. He had a whole bunch, and I think the Phantom one is a collection of his articles too, kind of like Tom Collenborn's first ride through time was kind of a lot of his articles that he fleshed out. So I think that was with Phantom. There are a number, like I said, there's a number of things Bob wrote, and there's stuff on writing encrypted things and survival and making an Arastra, and he was excellent at drawing too. So you see a lot of the different stuff he would draw. I know there was one on kind of plants in the mountains and the superstitions, and it's drawings of the plants. It's really well done, and then it talks about the plant and stuff. So I know Rick Gwynn had a copy or the original of that, and I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if the Gwynn family still has it. I don't think they turned it in. He got that from Bambi. He got it from one of them, Bebe, one of them. And Teresa, I don't know. He got that. He had several books, and they're like sketchbooks that Bob wrote in, and those were interesting. So the one I remember with the plants was really cool because most people wouldn't care about it. There was nothing really Dutchman in the one, but it was very interesting that he drew and had the etymology of the plant and the plant name and the Latin name and everything about, you could want to know about the plant and where it was found in the mountains, and then he had drawings of it. So, like I said, he was very, very talented. I think today, I don't know how well he would have been on the internet, but today we'd see it completely different, the amount of actually knowledge and the material he had. 10 more years, a lot of it would have been available on the internet, because he did like to place it out there, but yeah. After an AZ summer, I remember wasted word. I don't know if anybody gets that thin. Does anybody get that thin? Man, because a lot of the pictures you see of him were definitely the later in days, and he was looking pretty bad. He was always skinny though, but there's some others that he doesn't look quite as bad. So there you go. But yeah, I don't think I have a bound copy of Phantom. I'm thinking about it. I have a lot of bound copies of manuscripts. I don't think I have one of that. I'll have to look. See, it's not one of the longer ones. Longest one is Crazy Jake's. Crazy Jake's is like that thick. One of them. There's 2 of them. One of them is super thick, and it's hard to read. It's just made up stuff. Hey, Jax, nice of you to show up. You're late. All right, so Jax showed up, and Rocky showed up. That means everybody else left the house, and the dogs don't know what to do. Hey, ya. Okay, so we're all in here, but yeah, talking about the Bob Ward stuff, I really liked when I read the stuff. Rick brought a lot of those, I don't know if you call them sketchbooks, scrapbooks, whatever, that Bob had drawn in and done. He brought a bunch of those he had gotten, and I went through those. I don't know what happened to him. I know he had a fire. I know some stuff was saved. I know I saw some stuff, but I never got copies of any of it. I got to read it. I just got to sit there and read through a lot of it. So, Larry Hedrick said that he and Tom Collenborn went to the Dutch Hunters Rendezvous at Bob Ward's place. No, it wasn't the Dutch Hunters Rendezvous. That was the Mountain Man Rendezvous. Larry's old. We'll give him credit. And he was kind of almost right. It wasn't a Dutch Hunters Rendezvous. That was the Mountain Man's Rendezvous. And I got pictures of it and all that. And I don't remember seeing Larry in any of the pictures. Tom was in them. Salvador's in them. Rick Gwynn's in them. I'm trying to think who else is in them. Bunch of guys. We got the pictures of them. I don't remember seeing Larry in the pictures. I'll have to look at them. There was a few of them. It wasn't a lot. I'm trying to think. There might have been 4. But it was 2 or 3 or 4. One of the funniest stories about it is Tom went out there. And Tom got to the gate, and Rick Gwynn was out there. Rick didn't know Tom at the time. And Tom showed up at the gate, and Rick said, I'm here to let you, I'm here to collect the guns and stuff. And Rick's, who are you? You have an invitation. And Tom was like, well, I know Bob. Bob knows me. Just let me through. Rick wouldn't. And I can't remember what it is. Either Tom, I think, had to wait. Rick had to go all the way back down to the cabin and talk to Bob, and then Bob had to come up and look, because Rick wouldn't let Tom in. So, but I've seen Tom in those pictures. Tom's in the pictures. I don't remember when I saw Larry in. Sal's in the pictures, though. I know Salvador's in. And that was a thing, the Mountain Man's Rendezvous, and there was a scroll, and there was some other stuff, and drawings and stuff concerning it. And I think he did at least 2 or 3. He might have done 4 before, and then he passed away. You got to remember, Bob lived at several different places back in there, and similar too. But that wasn't, I don't know, that could have been the inspiration for the Dutch Hunter Rendezvous, because that was Salvador. And no, that wasn't Salvador, that was Joe Roboto. Salvador was the Treasure Hunter of the Year awards. Joe Roboto was one of the people that really thought they had a gathering, and this is 20 years ago, and we all got together, and Larry Hedrick was nowhere in sight at that point. He didn't know any of us existed. Larry was, I don't know, no, Larry was already done with the museum, moved on from the museum and stuff. I'm trying to remember. It was through Ron Feldman, and we were going out by the Twin Buttes. It had to do with Bob Ward's book, though. I will say that. It had to do with a picture, I think, that was in Ward's book. I'd have to go back and look. Anyways, they were getting together, and everybody was talking about what to call it. There's 12, 15 people showed up, and let's see, it was Joe Roboto, Greg Davis, Jack Carlson, Roger Newkirk was there, Larry Wright was there. Anyways, they showed up, and when they were doing it, they said we should call it something. And they were coming up with different names. And somewhere I have the list of what they were going to call it. And somewhere along the way, someone just mentioned, and one of the names that was 3 or 4 names that was mentioned was Dutch Hunter Rendezvous. And everybody kind of thought that one was the best of the bunch. Some of them were really bad. They were stupid. And so, I mean, it was like the Dutchman happening. It was really some lame stuff. So I remember that. And so that was the first one. And the second one was when we said, because they were going to move it every year to a different location. And the second year they were looking for a location. That was when Greg Davis talked to myself and Randy Wright and said, you guys need to talk to Joe and see if you guys can move it to the Don's Camp. We'll get the Don's Camp this year. And we moved it to there for the second year. kind of similar to the Dons. First year at their first water, and then after that they were down at Peralta Trailhead the rest of the time. But we moved it down there, and that's when Joe, and there was a lot of, we had the clique thing going early on. Everybody was in their own clique, and they thought they had to have the camp that everybody sat in. And Randy and I recognized a lot of the problems, so we went, well, why don't we just all get together one night? Everybody can do their thing, whatever, and it doesn't have to be based around any one person. Now, the biggest camp was Joe Robato's. Joe's was where there was a lot of free food and drinks and stuff. And then there was the drinking group. And it was, a little split off, but, I'm not going to use names because of how the separation was. But that second year was where we realized, and Jack Sanfelice came out, and he talked at one camp, and then he'd run up the hill and talk at another camp, and then he'd talk about, he had Silver Was King out, and he was trying to talk about the book, and he was literally going to have a heart attack running around the camp trying to talk to everybody. So Randy and I would move from camp to camp and sit around. So we would go up to one and have a couple beers and sit around with them, and then we'd move to the next one. It was always, we figured we could get free food and beer just by moving camp to camp, which is what we did. So we did that, and then Jack kept showing up right after us. And Jack would show up, and then we'd hear Jack's talk, and we were like, okay, we heard most of it, because we heard the whole talk down in Joe's camp. So we just keep moving along, and then Jack would show up again, all huffing, puffing. All right, guys, you want to hear about my new book? And then he'd give the talk again. So when we finished, I remember there was a group of us met. I'm trying to think. It was probably around December or January. And we sat in a room, and it was like for Randy and I and Joe to work together and us try to organize something that we thought was working right. Kevin Noonamaker, who's gone, was there, and Kevin made a lot of sense to some of it. Some of the people who were there didn't. I think they were just trying to get it away from Joe. Thought they could get it away from me and Randy. For whatever reason, Randy and I thought, well, let's not have rules. Let's just basically everybody come, have a good time. Joe can be camp host. We'll have it was Friday nights. We had the guest speakers, and we'll do that. In the first year, we had the Arizona Rangers Historical Law Enforcement group out. We had Greg speaking on the Dons of Arizona, and then we had Jack Sanfelice on When Silver Was King. That was our first program officially, which would have been the third rendezvous. And then we had a hike, and I'm trying to remember where the hike went. It might have went to the Miller Mines. George Miller's Mines up in Bark Canyon, I think, with Jack Carlson leading. That might have been the hike that year. So it was Jack Carlson and maybe Dick Walp leading that hike. So that was the third rendezvous. The first two were very, just everybody kind of didn't do their own thing. They just kind of came and went, and that was how that worked. But I don't remember Larry Hedrick being there until after Tom started showing up. Tom probably showed up around, Columborn showed up around the 4th or 5th or 6th one. So they were long going, and Tom would show up on Thursday night, and Tom would show up Thursday, hang out with Joe and them. I would see him Friday. He didn't really stay for the guest speaker. Him and Sharon would go home. And I just kept talking to him, saying, Tom, you really should stay the weekend. At least come out each night and hang out. And then Tom finally started coming out Thursday. He would spend Thursday night with Roger and Joe and, the people that were there a day early. And then they would all move into camp together. And Thomas Glover and those, he was hanging with that group. And then one year someone had a problem because Tom's dog Bucky started barking during the guest speakers. Bucky was just being a happy dog. I don't think anybody cared, but someone talked to Tom about it. And because of that, asked if he could just leave him down in camp or not bring him at all, and that pissed Tom off. So Tom would just sit down in Joe's camp or my camp with Bucky and wouldn't go up to the guest speakers after that. And so Tom still came out, but yeah, that kind of did him. I told him, I said, we don't really care. Bring the dog. We'd all brought our dogs at different times, so I didn't see it as a problem. But yeah, I'm trying to think. Larry Hedrick had to come out after Tom started staying, and he might have came out with Tom. I don't know. Tom always came out with Sharon, so I don't know when Larry started coming out. He came out with other people. So Larry always came with other people, I think, and it wasn't Tom. So, but let's see here. So it wasn't that was the Mountain Man Rendezvous thing that Bob Ward had, which that was a long way to get around to it. Didn't give up the side piece. Ken Worthy has a lunch of the Dos Butte, the Gila River. Is that where you went? No, that wasn't it. No, I'll have to look it up what the picture was. There were some pictures of markings, and they wanted to find those markings because nobody knew exactly where they were. They went out, they camped, they had ATVs and quads, and they went out and searched for them to find the pictures, and they could find the terrain, but they couldn't find any of the stuff that was in the pictures, wondering if the pictures were doctored and whatnot. I remember that was the main point. That was how they got everybody to finally go, is argue about it, and some people, well, no, it's there, it's out. Okay, let's go prove it, and all of us go together and take pictures. That's how it happened. And then they camped, had a good time, made some shirts, gave away some coffee mugs. I got one of the first coffee mugs up on the shelf, but and that's how it continued. It was the initial Rendezvous was they tried to make it real organized, and me and Randy tried to keep it up. We decided to do away with the shirts, but we kind of went with the coffee mugs. Randy was in charge of the coffee mugs, that sort of stuff, and then he lost his ass on those. We had to quit doing it. We were doing every year a different coffee mug. I think we did at least 3 or 4 years, and then he was so sick of being stuck with coffee mugs and the cost and then all the problems with people with them, and he ended up with a bunch of chipped coffee mugs. I think he finally brought a bunch of them down and just gave them away. He just wanted to get away from it finally. Hot one today. Yep, I heard about you over 40 years ago. You was a legend. I wasn't a legend back then from what I was told. Then I found you on YouTube and you were a rock. Wow, 40 years ago. 40 years ago I was 20. I don't think anybody knew who the fuck I was 40 years ago. Man, well, thank you. I just don't. I was very under the radar for a long, long time. Howdy, everyone. I was there last year at the Rendezvous. It was a good time. Yeah, Bobby was. Bobby's sitting right over next to me off to my left. Yeah, I'm trying to think. 40 years ago, I was so under the radar on purpose. And it could have, I'm not saying you're lying, because it could have been someone that knew me from one place or another, but I definitely it was a very different world 40 years ago. We were coming out of the 70s, obviously, and I kept much more low profile going in the mountains, who I knew. I didn't, and I was kind of the people I was around at that time were just starting to fade from going in the mountains, so I was looking for new people. And if you watch Chasing Legends, you'll kind of catch that vibe. 25 years what? 25 years? 2001 was now 25 years ago would have been around the time the Feldman Forum and all that, and that's where I kind of popped up in that. And met Randy Wright and a lot of guys like that, and kind of started reconnecting with some people. But that was because there's a certain point, and it's kind of the dead years where I was just in the mountains by myself, and I really didn't have anything to do with anyone else, because I was kind of over people being interested or people not having the time and stuff, so I just go out by myself. And then we kind of, I'm trying to remember, it was the kind of the forums and that stuff, and then the few people I thought were cool in the Rendezvous, and Joe Roboto, Randy Wright, and those guys, And I started kind of like talking to them a little, and Greg Davis, and then I started kind of hanging out with them a bit then. Even though I'd met Greg and Ron and Tom many, many years before when I was younger. I don't want to change the subject, but what is going on in Surprise? Some freak took his ex-hostage and shot their baby. Now the house is on fire? I have no idea. I don't see the fire. It's not close. Let me look across the street and stuff. Not that I'm thinking badly of my neighbor, but there's no, I don't know. It's quiet. I have no idea. I did not know that. No, I'm not a news guy. So someone has to tell me, like you just did, for me to know the news for the most part, because I am not a news person. I'm the kind of person, I'll read certain things, but I avoid a lot of stuff because, I don't know, I find it depressing, one. Back when Joe and Jim had on TreasureNet, long before TreasureNet, there was it was Jim Hat, who never was Jim Hat. He always was an alias. It was Ron Feldman's Lost Dutchman Forum. That started before 2001. And it was Joe Roboto. I think I was in it before Joe. Jim was about 12 different people, and then he went over to Desert USA, then he went over to TreasureNet. He got kicked out of everywhere. But the earliest people were myself, Peter Esposito, Roger Newkirk. I don't know. They had the name Wiz was one of them. But yeah, there was a number of people that were early on involved. I have to, that would be a cool interview with Ron of how that was set up and done, because there was a forum and then they stopped and then they restarted. So the forum that's still out there is the second forum. And so all those guys later went somewhere else. The original forum, the Lost Dutch forum that we were on, that was just Dutchmen. There was no other stuff involved or anything. There was, and later they added some other stuff, but it was just Lost Dutchman Talk. That was it. If you didn't do Lost Dutchman Talk, you got, basically, we just scrapped the thread. It was just Dutch Talk, pure, straight, and only. And that was a cool. Rich Robinson was part of that. Thomas Glover was part of that. Greg Davis. All of us were in on that all the time. And that was a good forum. And because everybody, and that's how the Rendezvous started, from that forum, that group of people. And Jim never came out to the Rendezvous. I kept inviting him, but he had so many problems with... He always thought he had more problems than he did. Everybody would have been fine with Jim coming out. Jim thought he had too many issues with too many people, and because of that, he never came out. And he did donate the Stone Cross replicas to be auctioned. But other than that, Jim had nothing. He talked to me, and we talked, but he didn't. He wanted to come out to the Rendezvous, but he wouldn't. And I tried to tell him, nobody's gonna bug you. Nobody ever gave anybody crap out there. Okay, back when Joe and Jim was on Desert USA came after all that. Today's news: we're all still living in the Twilight Zone. The news has been random carnage. Didn't we all get kicked? No, nobody got kicked out of the original one. My grandpa was looking for the LDM in the late 40s. That's very cool. No, the Lost Dutchman mine site, I don't even know if anybody ever got kicked out of there. We just kind of like worked it out ourselves. And there was plenty of people that showed up. Like I gave you the names. Dave Cook, who was on TreasureNet, was originally with us over there. So you had Dave Cook. He wasn't one of the originals. The first 20, 30 people in there, I was one of those. I was one of the top 10, 15. And I know Roger Newkirk was. I know Peter Esposito was. I made a list one day because I was surprised how early on I was in there. And I think Ron or Jesse, one of them, because they were kind of the Feldman moderator, or the forum moderators. And Joe Roboto, I was surprised, was a month or two after me. And so was Greg Davis. Anyways, that was the forum. Everything else fell in after it. It lasted a couple years or so. And then every time there was problems, people split off. There was a second forum Peter Esposito started, went on for a year or two. Then it fell apart and it disappeared completely. And then after that, everybody split off. Some of them went to the Lost Dutchman, some of them went to the Desert USA, and then some of them went to Treasure Net. So when I say Lost Dutchman Forum, it's just the Lost Dutchman Forum. And that's where everybody was. So if you wanted to kind of read stuff, Tom Collenborn would go on Desert USA. I don't think I've ever seen Tom on Treasure Net. So in Treasure Net, to me, I try to post, I try to pay attention. Treasure Net is like Aesop. No, I was going to put it. Treasure Net's Grimm's fairy tales. And it's just really hard for me because while there were some good people in there and doing some good research, it was so bad and so hard to keep a thread. Where back in the day, we used to always be like, hey, you're off thread, get back on thread. Delete your post and get it back on thread. And it worked pretty well. And we worked with each other and we all asked questions. And it wasn't people telling people like, this is where the Dutchman is and this is how this is. We were all inquiring and asking, have you been out in here? What did you think? I saw this. Here's a picture. What do you think of this? Da, 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 da. We were serious discussing and going out and looking for each other and stuff. It was pretty cool. I'm trying to remember anyone that got kicked out of the Feldman Forum. People kept changing their names and coming back, and we knew who they were, so that doesn't count. Because Peter was about 4 different people. That was kind of a weird. Is that the one? Peter's, he just quit doing. He just decided to quit doing it, and it was the Lost Dutchman something, but it was. Yeah, that was a pretty good forum. They all have their problems. That one had the problems of one individual was trying to decide, he would decide what everybody could do, and Peter didn't feel it. Peter just did it just like if Peter felt like you were off base, he just got rid of the thread or got rid of whatever you posted. There was no ands, ifs, or buts, or warnings or nothing about it. You didn't get a note or anything. It worked pretty good. And there was some really solid stuff going on there, but one individual's pride got in the way of how big of a deal he thought he was, and that crashed it in the end. And I think Peter just got sick of the whole thing because he realized, even though he started something pretty cool and it was working, the person involved with him early on that was kind of tight with it was causing him the most problems. And if you ever followed any of those forums, you know who those people were. Okay. No, that one thing that happened on the Feldman one is they decided to archive the early, all the early posts. And when they archived it, everybody became Count, the administrator. And so when you read it now, a lot of the stuff is hard to go through. I thought they should have never done it. They did it to clean it up, for it to kind of reboot, and then see what was going on with it, how much new information was coming. Because it was a lot of stuff going on there at one time. That was a hot and heavy forum. Probably the best Dutchman forum ever. And it was a good idea. They needed to archive it under everybody's actual names. But the other problem was, I was always Zental. Joe Roboto was always Joe Roboto or Joe. I think he was Joe. Greg Davis was always Greg Davis. Roger Newkirk was always Roger. I mean, we literally stayed the same person the whole time. And then there were people that were using 4 and 5 identities. Jim Hatt did. Pippin White Paws, I think, did. Donald did. And because of that, Peter did. Because of that started happening, it got stupid. And then there's a few people on TreasureNet that came into it and goofed around. And they did it in the proper. We have separate sections for things. But then what I call the comedy sections, became people were posting and talking more in the comedy bullshit sections than the actual Dutchman. And then that was the problem in that forum. And then it's still there. People still post occasionally. It's just a lot of these guys are gone, and it's all there, and it just became a headache. And then once you start posting or saying something, it's not that group of people. It's hard to bring everybody back. In TreasureNet, I'm trying to think, outside of you have Paul Shimmick, I'm a Cub fan, but other than Cub fan came in after a few years into the other one, but I'm trying to think of who's in TreasureNet that was really, there in the big part of that forum. I think most of those guys are gone. Rich Robinson doesn't do much of anything anymore. If he does, I don't know it. Dave Cook's passed away. Jim Hatt, like I said, Jim Hatt, you had to call people and say, hey, is that one Jim? Because Jim was funny like that, man. He was definitely make up a name. God. Like I said, McChesney was always, I think he was always Gollum on any forum. So there were people that were always the same people. But everybody did keep the peace. And the other funny thing was we all could talk to each other on the phone. So, let me catch up on this stuff. Okay. Is that the one server that went down? No, they changed the server. Okay, they'll post. News never. Okay, shows. Did the Utah guys have any prospecting equipment? No. Well, if you want the best site to go to, the heart is not a rock. Okay. Joe. We debated for 3 or 4 years. Are you returning back for the hunt? I asked respect. Yeah, I'm back. Still always hunting. Joe was a funny guy. Joe was a little bit like Tom. I know why Joe Roboto and Tom Collenborn got along, because Joe had a habit of baiting people, and you think he believed in the same thing as you or was arguing the opposite side when he completely agreed with you. Joe was funny. He had a great way of pulling information out of people, and I caught on to Joe very early on of what he was doing. But yes, Joe was a very unique character. Joe's biggest problem was, Joe admitted, was he could be a bit over the top on stuff. And he, it was the same problem. The two guys that baited each other the most was Joe and Peter Esposito. The two of them went after each other all the time. There is no feud that will ever be on forums concerning treasure hunting like Joe Roboto and Peter Esposito. I think all that stuff's... Greg Davis might have copies of some of their arguments, but man, that was some melting down the house stuff those guys would get into. And some major name. It was intellectual name calling, but man, they went after each other, and it was so tense for so long. I have a picture somewhere that we said hell froze over because we got the two of them to sit in chairs next to each other and shake hands. And the thing is, they were both Italian, and they both really liked to go after each other and try to get each other's goat, and that was a lot of it. I think their tempers. They thought they were having fun with it, and then I think it always got the best of them. But that was Joe and Peter. Those were the two, man. Joe would go after anybody, but Peter and him, that was, wow. That was some pretty intense stuff. It really was disruptive. It was literally when the two of them would go after each other, you just got out of the way. Okay, what is the general opinion of Estee Connoisseur's book? I like the book. I think the book's okay. She had a completely her own unique take on it. I have a lot of audio interview and a lot of audio of her. So I have several number tapes. She did some interviews with some people. She was really into I think the stone maps for a while, and Bilberry crosses. She was interviewing, doing a lot. I did a few interviews with Michael Bilberry. Kind of like a lot of Dutch hunters, got her mind latched onto one thing. Once she found something and got a taste of that, thought that had to be it. I know there were several people that really into her stuff. When I read her book, I knew someone that knew her and a lot of the sites specific and sites that weren't in the books. And I went out and checked them all out. And then I was like, because she had her Lost Dutchman Jr. and that kind of stuff. So I got interested in it, but it was just to a certain extent. And then I realized she put in good research. She wrote a nice book. I liked the book to some degree. I would have liked to meet her. I think she was probably a better researcher and was doing a better job than she realized. Sometimes people do really good research and get really good material and don't even know what they're uncovering. And you start going through stuff and you look at it and go, why because they literally matrix and get themselves so focused on something they miss stuff on the way. So she did pretty good stuff. But it kind of, like, again, it gets all over the place. I would have liked to meet her just to talk to her about a few things that she'd never elaborated on. So the Utah guys just went out with some lanterns and an umbrella. And I'm trying to think of what else they have. I have the pictures. They went out. They had little backpacks. They had an umbrella or a parasol, however you want to call it. It was open. And that's another weird thing, see? No one ever brings that up. The parasol, just the whole thing's weird with that. I won't go into the parasol being open and why didn't it blow away and why was it open if they died at night and all these other questions everybody could have. But they looked like they sat on those rocks and then just laid back on these weird surfaces and died. That's it. Those two guys. Another guy was found over on Black Mesa. He, instead of going down and taking the trail out, he tried to go over Black Mesa and was found on the far side, which someone tried to debate that with me, but then several people told me exactly what bush he was found under, and he was trying to shortcut going over the mountain. Or maybe somebody was after him. I don't know. But there's a lot of curious things there. And I wanted to go out there, and I talked to several people about it, and I don't know, there's some weird iffy stuff going on with that. A lot of problems, and if you see the pictures, there's a lot of problems, but I will not post or share the pictures, because that's kind of the family or anybody that knew those guys and stuff, that's pretty tough. But I can honestly tell you, and anybody's seen them, is there's, the skeletal remains are very similar to Adolf Ruth. It's a very similar timeline to the Adolf Ruth story in a lot of ways. And if you look at that and you're saying, oh no, Adolf Ruth's body was too well preserved and buried and the skull, blah, blah, blah. No, when they went to pick up the remains, there were still flies all over it. It stunk like hell. It was similar to Adolf Ruth's. So everything was very similar. It's a good modern day equivalent. And it's not talking the murder or mystery. It's talking just how just the concept of what the bones and the remains, the condition they were in at the end. So, but they didn't have, I'm trying to think. They had their wallets, I think. I remember there's the lantern. I don't remember two lanterns. There might have been two in the picture, and I'm not going to bring it up now on the computer. But I know there was one lantern. They said it was in the on position and battery had run out. There was the umbrella that was open, laying there. And then the two bodies laying back. One's down the hill. It depends on which perspective that the picture's at, but one was one was up the hill. They're both laying back, like looking downhill the same way, or sitting facing downhill, west, down into the canyon. I'm trying to think of anything else is there. Their clothes are partially on them still, intact for the most part, which is another odd thing because most of the time the animals pull everything apart. For some reason, the animals didn't really touch the remains much there. That's an odd one. The animals left the remains alone. Now, the parasites, that type of stuff, did their job, but I'm saying usually the hands, feet, a bunch of stuff's missing. It wasn't. That was really strange about that one. Okay. Why is it that some say Waltz had a mine as back as 1868? Well, he had a mine. Well, the 1877 date comes from is they wanted to go with the Silver Chief. That's the Silver Chief guys. And I don't know how that all works. I mean, like I said, you can shoot holes through that whole thing all day. That's a barrel has no water in it anymore. But 1868 is when Waltz comes to Phoenix, 1867-68. So people a lot of times push that as the starting point, that he came down because a lot of people he knew were here, and then he went into Superstitions. He could have there is the period between Gross Load, Big Rebel, General Grant, and him settling in Phoenix. There's a couple of years there that there's nothing. We don't know where he was, what he was doing. That could be the time period. Now, everyone, the newspaper accounts and people in interviews afterwards, because see, a lot of this stuff doesn't make it in books. People talk that when he moved on the property and had his property, he built something similar to an Apache wiki up. This could have been the spurring of the stories of like he lived with the Indians and crap. Who knows? People make up a lot of weird stuff. So he was living, basically, they said, it looked bad. But he had the property and he had the water rights. Now, he had just settled in, so maybe that's what he was putting together. Within several years, he has the adobe house, he has outbuildings, he has a lot going for him. So it could have been he just moved in, and they're talking, oh, he didn't have nothing. He was poor. He was living off his name. Well, it could have been he just came in and he was just getting started, and was like, hey, can you help me out? Because I just moved in and I'm starting to break ground. And he had money, or gold or something. So we don't know if he had the gold prior to that or not. I tend to think that it has to be something prior to that, because it just doesn't make sense otherwise, because he does seem to kind of settle down a bit. And even with, you can't, I know there's the people that love the Silver Chief story, the people that love Brownie Holmes, want to ignore Reinhardt and Julia. The problem is he knew them. We know he knew them. And he spent time with them, and they buried him. We know that. So it's like the solid people, the people that you know. And they told very similar things, but it just doesn't make sense that he would have told them just a ton of bullshit. And his thing was that he hadn't been to the mine in 10 years. So that would put it about 1880, if he's off a year, 1879 to 1881, the last time he was at the mine. Or it could have been a little longer. And then we have the story of the census around 1880, 1881, where Waltz is very ill and he wills his stuff to the Starr brothers, and all this stuff goes on. So it could be that was his last trip in the mountains. Now remember, the Holmes story is a total freaking mess on that. So you got to almost not listen to Brownie Holmes on anything about that, or Dick Holmes. So we know Waltz told them this. We know that actually lines up with actual historical data that he became very ill, and he never really seemed to go back in the mountains much after that. He said that last trip is when he got the last cache, not the last cache, but the second cache, and came out. He made it sound like it'd been a year or two. So his trip where his partner dies, you'd have to put at 1877-78, according to that timeline. Now, we don't have that number. He didn't say, hey, we arrived there and then my partner died and 2 years later I came exactly and did this. He just said later. So we don't know how much time transpired. If we went by that timeline, there were all these people in the Silver Chief. He couldn't have been there and doing and all this happening with him and his partner and stuff. None of that would have been realistic. So that kind of cancels that whole story completely out of it possibly being there. Now, it could be off, and he could have been there much earlier, because he could have been there, they could have discovered it, and you have to give the time allowance of him meeting Peralta, them and Peralta going out, if that's the way it happens, and then they come back after Peralta. So if you take all that effect, that could have been a year or two, taking that much time. But it's still, it's hard. Everybody always wants to come up with the short solution. And the problem is you have enough actual history and dates that you can't work around. Waltz did say it's been 10 years since he'd been there, and he said that he hadn't gone back since, and we also know he'd become ill, and after he became ill, he really didn't get around very well and couldn't see very well, and we have all the accounts of that. So that seems very clear that probably by 1880 he was done going in the mountains. And so whatever happened was before that, and take your guess at the rest of it. And people will guess and they will make up shit. Okay, let me catch up here. He would have had him to gathering to find the lost. The lost thorn mine has nothing to do with Jacob Waltz. That's didn't exist out here. No, I came up with the 1877 day. The Silver King had the Silver Chief. I was saying Silver King is a different mine. Silver King's down by Superior. Silver Chief's in Hewitt Canyon. If the three Mexicans had to work the mine a few feet out, did Waltz first find the mine traveling from the old fort? No, he found it because of Peralta. You think he had a partner? I think that's the hard one. Jim Bark's material would tell us that. He has the original questions and material, they have the notes that Jim Bark took. And I would like to say the fact that that's always been, people have always tried to tear everything apart. I've never heard that was in error. I've always heard that they met someone named Peralta. They went out. They worked with Peralta. Peralta said, hey, I don't want to go back up in there. You guys, you're naturalized citizens. You guys can work this out. How about I do this? You guys can go back and do this. They realize there's plenty of gold still in there for us right now. We can make as much or more because we can make more than one trip. Hey, let's do that good deal. Shake on it. He supplies them. They go back, and the partner and everything goes to crap. That actually really makes sense because it's not dramatic until the partner's dead from the Apaches, and it's Waltz never saying he found the body or all this. It's Waltz Bakus coming back and saying his partner is he doesn't know what happened. The camp's completely torn up and all that. So he just basically takes a quick look around, digs up one of the caches, kind of covers everything else up, and just gets out of there. And I think the guilt could have been could have there been something else he could have done? Could he have spent more time? But he's probably scared as crap, if that's the true story. I wish Estee Conister would expand on her comments in her book of the group of men recovered. Some things of great value is in her book. I'd have to listen to the audio. Most everything in her book that she talks about and isn't completely revealed in detail is in audio tapes and stuff. She talked freely there. People had a habit of talking very freely about stuff, and the archives about that kind of stuff, there's a lot of stuff revealed. I don't know if Greg Davis has a lot of her material, how much of it he has. Greg never joins us on this. He wouldn't know how to operate this. But, it's... I don't know how much of her material's out there, who has it. One of the problems is, if there should be a group of people, and that was the idea of Tom and even Larry Hedrick, Ron Lawrence, Clay Wurst, Greg Davis. Those five gentlemen wanted to put something together where they pulled everything in, and then everybody could leave their Dutch hunting stuff, and it could archive up, and then all the Dutch hunters would have access and continue to preserve the legacy and the material and all that. Great idea. Tom collected a lot of people's stuff. Greg collected a lot of people's stuff. So the two probably biggest collections of Dutch hunter material that's been acquired is Tom's and Greg's. Greg's is through the Museum Historical Society in his private collection. Tom was because he's Tom Collenborn, and Tom knew everybody and they left him their stuff. So those two collections are overwhelming amount of stuff. And there's the surface stuff. The stuff in the museum is nothing. The museum stuff is blah. The stuff at Greg's is where it gets very interesting. And then there's the stuff that nobody ever gets to see. I don't always know why. Sometimes it's a personal reason. The person asked for so long, or the person asked that not that there's select people that they're very careful who they shared it with because of personal reasons of certain things. And I understand some of it. It's the language and things. They don't want stuff published or repeated that we wouldn't give a crap about today, but people might. say, well, I can't believe that's how he talked about people and said things about people. And it was in the moment, it was in the time. It's not a big deal. So those collections were supposed to be grouped together. Tom was going to leave his, Greg was going to leave his. It was all going to go in. There was going to be an archive, and there'd be someone you could call down, make an appointment like you can today, and then you'd be able to go into this building, and you'd have access to everything. And wear your little white gloves, and there'd be a copy machine, and you could go in and go through and check stuff. That was what was supposed to be. Tom would share stuff with people. Greg would have people come over and look at stuff. But in the end, what we got was none of the above. Tom passed away. Greg still shares. I would say, I don't know how much Ron has. Shoes has got stuff buried. I know he's got a lot of stuff. I don't know how much stuff others have. I don't even know how much crap I got now. I feel like I'm becoming Greg Davis. I got a ton of stuff now, and you're not trying to collect more than try to find a way to put it together, share. That's why we did the website and this stuff, is try to share more stuff as we went in the process, because that was kind of a problem to us, is that I didn't think people were sharing properly, and I really wanted to break down that, because sometimes it's like, people, why should someone waste their time or waste their life, or something happened to them in the mountains, let's say that, put themselves in a dangerous situation, or a situation they wouldn't be in if they knew better. And it's just like, it's better for people to be more informed. Now, you don't have to listen to me, and I try to help people, but it's if people could go and look for themselves and go through it, and then put the material together and look at things that substantiate, and it would be a better place. I think if they would have been able to put that research center together and put all of it together the way I'm talking, and it would have really happened, instead of being a museum with a railroad and Elvis Chapel and all that that's not what it was supposed to be. The museum was supposed to be the archives and a research center first and foremost, and it's never been that. But if it would have been what it was originally going to be, I believe that the bark notes and some of that kind of material would actually be there. I think what happened is they tried in the 80s and 90s, and once Tom and Greg's still a member of the board, but Tom kind of got tired of it, dealing with all the bullshit. It just, a lot happened, and now Greg's the only founding member, and they've even said he's not a founding member now, because he lived out of state and couldn't sign the original document. So now they try to push him out by saying he's not a founding member, which is a shame. But yeah, we lost a lot from that, and it would change a lot of people's ideas. Think about it. You could go down and just make an appointment and go in and look and see things I'm talking about. It would be on file. I could say, hey, go to file cabinet 16, go to drawer 3, and look under this file, and you're going to see this material. And it would be original materials. It would be so cool to share it that way with people. I don't know. It's going to be hard to say if that'll ever happen. Knowing what you know today, has your idea, Williams? Yeah, because a lot changed, because I was a profile map guy. I was a huge profile map guy, and then Randy Wright did a thing on the profile map. That changed my mind. I never was a stone map guy. The moment I saw, I always forget his name, Sikorsky's book. The moment I saw the first time I ever saw anything about the stone maps was in Sikorsky's book. And when I saw that, I was like, what the heck is this? And I was kind of, from that moment, not sure what to think of it at all. And I was like, is this for real? And, it wasn't like I was saying, oh, those are fake. I was kind of like, is this even for real? Is this guy, what? And then the more, then I never could warm up to those at all. But there's a lot of things changed. I mean, I know there was a lot of people attached to the people involved in Peter's Mesa, and all those people have kind of trailed out the whole thing. I think you always looked where the original people went earliest on, and you go by journals and diaries and where they really were in certain things and found certain things, and it hones you in on an area. And that area is kind of always interest to me. Now, there's a lot of ground to cover there, because I kind of tend to make it quite a large area of possibilities, but I think so much of it is people were steered wrong by people that thought they knew what they were doing, and they didn't know how to turn and say, oh, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I misread this, and they don't want to start over, so they just perpetuate that myth, and that's a shame. I mean, again, they're gone, and other people go chasing down a dream. If someone lies to someone and then they chase something for 60, 70 years and it's just a lie, that's kind of a shame. That's kind of a shitty person that would do that to somebody. Maybe somebody misread or misheard it. That's a different thing, but yeah, I don't know. I think Herman gave people pretty sound advice, because it seems like a lot of people looked in the same areas. Anyone that wasn't looking in the similar areas that he had been looking in, and certain people close to him were looking in, didn't really know him. So I find there's a lot of common ground in it. So I think, but then there was the problem, like when I met the guy that he was a young man, and he had met or knew Reinhard Petrasch, and it wasn't a big deal, because it's not like I unvaulted the most important thing in the world. The guy was like, he didn't know him. He was just a kid. And he said he remembered who it was, and it wasn't until years later he realized, because it was always kind of a joke thing. That guy knows where the Lost Dutchman mine is. Oh, really? Doesn't everybody? And his take on Reinhardt was he would talk about it. If someone asked him a question, he would try to discuss it with someone, and the moment someone would basically act like, but isn't it this? Do you really know what you're talking about? He would just be like, you know what? I must be wrong. And that was it. I think he got so sick of that. It was just beyond him, of like, people didn't understand. Taz, to be honest with you, I don't know if it was they could read a map, and I don't know how much of a map there was, and it wasn't the stone map, so I don't even know where people, as far as maps. But so many of those guys early on, Herman was a very nice person, liked to do his bit of his own myth making and storytelling, as did Brownie Holmes. But I think a lot of people, it was really difficult. And I think sometimes they were maligned. Remember, Reinhardt was this drunk and lost everything and all this crap. And then Julia was a crazy lady with crazy religion and voodoo and all this shit, and took advantage of Waltz and that crap. I mean, they maligned these people time and time again. People believed in odd things. There could have been odd and unusual things, and Albert Schaefer was a bit of an oddball. But Jim Bark and Sim Zealy definitely visited her before she died and said she was in bad shape, and there was other people who visited her, and she seemed pretty together to some degree. It wasn't all about the religion and all, and she was willing to talk. Just think of some of the people that visited her, some of the stuff they were hearing from her. That was probably historically really stuff that we'd love to hear. Little bits and pieces of insight. She maybe didn't know which canyon or this or that, but it would have been great insight. And unfortunately, nobody thought at the time that Julia Thomas's historical narrative on Jacob Waltz was that important. The only person that decided that, well, two people decided what Julia Thomas really had to say was important. Jim Bark and Sim Zealy. And Ely really didn't make a lot of notes. He used Jim Bark's material. So think about it. All the history of the Dutchman, Jim Bark, right after Waltz dies, within a year, is making notes and keeping track of some stuff and starting to search for the mine. Other than him, nobody was keeping track of all of it and trying to kind of pull it together and all. And people say, well, Bark maybe wasn't. He's the only person that seemed to give a crap. Okay. The truth is often hard to believe. Okay. So there you go. I think we're running towards the end here now. But, yeah, it was a good one. I hope I got everybody's questions. I was trying to catch stuff, and it just gets tough because I'm trying to read it. And you guys ask some really good questions. We get into some really good conversations. And then I want to make sure not be distracted and try to answer them as fully as I can. Does anyone know how the exact... Yeah, Julia searched several different areas. Initially, she was out in Hog Canyon, and she was in that area. Her and Reinhardt and another individual went out there, and then later they came in and they went through the Goldfield area, First Water area, into the mountains, because they didn't know how to get in the mountains. They were looking for a way in the mountains. They didn't understand. And Thomas Glover did a really good discussion on how to lose a mine 1,000 different ways. Because the problem was, Waltz kept saying, okay, you're not listening, you're not paying, okay, how about this? So he kept giving them bits and pieces of things, but they came from different directions, different ways, so they didn't know if he was coming or going and what he was talking about interrelated. They finally, the last searches were down out, you probably think Marsh Valley, Needle Canyon, that area, between Bluff Springs Mountain, Blacktop, and that area. They were in there in the Three Red Hills, so they kind of ended up in that area. That would have been one of the final pushes with Reinhardt, Herman, and Gottfried. Trying to think. But a lot of people make a lot of Herman and Gottfried looking out by Hewitt and Rogers Canyon, but that was separate there. Everybody was, because there was a Two Soldiers mine out there, rumored out there too. But no, Tom's dad knew Herman. I have copies of stuff, and I know where they were searching with Herman and Herman's references to specific things in the area that they were doing. Herman was very into that area, and there was a good reason. But they had a hard time. I always take it initially as they had a hard time trying to figure out how to get in the mountains because they didn't have maps. They basically found someone and said, okay, we're supposed to do this, and then they went out. And think about it, you don't have the highway today, you don't have all that stuff, you're just going up into the mountains, and then whatever he told you, and then you're trying to think about it and figure it out and look at those mountains as you approach them and find your best way in. And I believe it was out by Hog Canyon stuff where Bark first ran into them, and then, or when they made their first trips, and then later they were coming around on the northwest side, going in through First Water, and they ended up down, like I said, down in the Marsh Valley area, down by Blacktop, and I don't know if they made it at the base of Weaver's Needle. And part of the theory of discussion is, did Julia think Weaver's Needle, after she heard about it, was an important piece of something because of something Waltz told her, or did she just assume it? It was the peak or the pinnacle or something that she was looking for. So no one quite knows. I say again, Jim Bark probably had that and wrote it down. It's more specific, and it just never has been shared specific. We've been given stuff, and like I said, I don't know why Jim Bark. I think Jim Bark printed what he thought was safe, and he didn't lie. I think there's nothing printed, and that's what I got from John Spangler. John Spangler seemed to imply that the stuff in the Bark notes isn't going to get you there, but it will tell you the history of how they were getting there. The more specific stuff is in Jim Bark's actual physical notes and material and stuff that nobody's seen. And so those are very separate things. It's confusing that we call the manuscript the Bark notes, of course. But Jim Bark knew enough to say, okay, if I would do this publicly or have a manuscript people could read, and Sims Ely, where they're not giving anything away, since Northcutt Ely and John Spangler were still searching for the mine, the families were giving nothing up since they were still in the mountains looking for the mine. So they always remember that, is what was published was safely published. It could have been just enough to put someone in the area that if they found something of interest, it would get back. What was the gathering of people from that Waltz rode with to the mountains? Gathering of people from Tucson. I know there was a group from Prescott when they were hunting the Apaches with King Woolsey and stuff. There was a number of different groups prospecting and stuff. I don't remember one Tucson, but gathering people from Tucson. I don't know. See, there's odd things sometimes in the history that people slip in a book, and I'm not always sure of it. I know there was the groups, and I actually did the Chasing Legends talking a little about how that, some of that King's Woolsey had all these people go out and they were trying to push the Apaches out. While they were out, they were definitely prospecting and searching areas and stuff. Stay safe, stay free, Taz. There you go. Hope you're doing well as possible as you can. So, yeah, I'm a little in the dark. Oh, by the way, my CM Punk, Best in the World t-shirt. Hi. So, you came late. Came at the end, but you came late. So, the Best in the World t-shirt. Nobody noticed or complimented on it. And we had no hockey talk this week. Yeah, we're kind of wrapping up, getting at the end here. So, it's getting dinner time. It's getting hungry time. But it's good to see people pop in. Even if they come in the end, it's fine. And then they can come back and watch it later and stuff. Awesome, Wayne. Thank you for your weekend. Play some guitar. Is the museum a nonprofit? Yes, it is. Yes, the museum is a nonprofit. Yes. It's a whole legal setup. So, okay. I hope you have an awesome weekend. Thank you, Wayne. Yeah, Glenn, you too. Yes, it's been a week, and yeah, there was a lot of good questions and a lot of good stuff in there. State Dutchman stuff, and it wasn't always maybe the coolest insight in the world. Smash the like button, everybody. Have a great weekend, and thank you, Wayne. Thank you. No, thank you, everybody. A little tired today. The heat's coming up, so that definitely kind of hits you for a loop and knocks you down. It makes you gather your breath. It just makes it a little, it's funny. It wears you out. You get so tired, you just want to sleep, and you just take a shower and you want to go to sleep. And then when you try to sleep, it just feels too warm. No, you had a storm. You lost service. That's what happened. See? And that's one of those problems with that type of the area of the country where you have storms and things and tornadoes and stuff, because yes, we don't have much of that here. It's just hot. And the funny thing is, it doesn't matter how hot it gets, we still have internet service and everything. It's kind of weird like that. Do you sing? Not for you, Ed. So, I did do that thing. I'll have to have Trevor. No, I'm not going to talk about it because it would open a can of worms for a bunch of other stuff people would ask. And 1:15 soon. It'll be a while. It's going to be. We've had a nice May. I'm going to say 1:15, maybe July. We're going to creep in. June's always warms up. Gets up to about 110, but the hot is going to be June. Or July, I mean. Yes, so one of the nice things about Arizona is the lack of tornadoes. We have storms. We have dust storms. We do have power outages and things, but it's nothing like when you get into the Midwest. The Midwest just gets hammered by stuff. Texas, Oklahoma, what else is up in there? Kansas, yeah, just Iowa. There's just so many people get hammered all through the Midwest and up and down the Mississippi. And yeah, it's one of the reasons people live here in 115 degree heat, is a lot of other stuff is not there and part of it. So there we go. It's time to get out of here. As much as I'd like to stay and I'd love to stay, it's time to eat. And I feel like the need of eating some dinner and relaxing, and most of all, more than anything for all of you, Arkansas. Yes, Arkansas is in there too, on that Mississippi, in that section where all that stuff happens, where people have basements and they have root cellars and cellars to get out of there. But I don't even know what I was going to say now. You cursed me on that. Okay, so whatever, it wasn't that important, was it? Oh, to be tired and hungry. Yes. So, but there we go. I'm glad we got the audio up and the video up. Anybody starts at the beginning, we had a lot of problems before we went live. When we went live, everything was working fine. It was up till the very last minute we couldn't get everything to work. Over and out, smile. Hi, I do. Good night, everyone. Good night. Good night. Good night. Everybody curl up, have a good night's sleep, and dream all your dreams, whether they be golden or whatnot. Yeah, that's who we didn't see. We didn't see the golden guy from Gilgold Prospecting. Everybody have a golden day. He didn't show up. Oh, man, I hope he's okay. Oh, there we go. All right, thank you, everybody. Everybody that was there with us, all you latecomers and people that showed up at the end. Thank you. I hope everybody has a great and wonderful night. Catch us again Monday on Chasing Legends. As for me, I'm going to get out of here because, like I said, I'm going to take my fancy dancy t-shirt and everything, and I'm going to go get me some dinner. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of the week. We will catch you Monday on Chasing Legends, and we will catch you Friday.